History is filled with men who died for glory, for honor, for empire, but Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest Roman of them all, died for gold. His end came not with triumph, not even with the dignity of an ordinary battlefield death, but with molten wealth forced down his throat, choking him in the most grotesque parody of his life's obsession. Crassus was not merely rich, he was the embodiment of Roman greed. He turned the ashes of fires into fortunes, wrung gold from misery, and built an empire of property and clients that made him both feared and despised. He stood beside Julius Caesar and Pompey in the First Triumvirate, shaping the destiny of Rome, and yet, when he sought the one thing money could not buy, lasting military glory, he found only ruin. His story is a cautionary tale carved into Roman memory, that the hunger for more, when unchecked, devours even the mightiest. The rise of Rome's richest man. To understand the brutal fate of Marcus Crassus, we must begin with the astonishing story of how he became Rome's wealthiest citizen, richer, it was said, than the treasury itself. Crassus was born around 115 BCE into a noble, wealthy family of the Licini Crassi. His father had served as consul and the family lived in luxury with vast estates. But Rome in the late Republic was a place of shifting allegiances and bloody upheavals. Civil war, political purges, and ambitious generals carved the Republic into factions. During the dictatorship of Sulla, Crassus learned his first lessons in both survival and opportunism. His family initially suffered under political turmoil. His father committed suicide after a defeat, and much of their fortune was endangered. Crassus fled into hiding, where he observed firsthand the volatility of Roman politics. But when Sulla returned to power, Crassus allied himself with the victor. It was here, amidst Rome's bloodiest proscriptions, where Sulla's enemies were declared outlaws and executed, their property seized, that Crassus began his climb. Crassus built much of his fortune in ways that horrified even other Romans. One of his most infamous schemes involved Rome's frequent fires. At the time, there was no organized fire brigade. Fires would rage through the crowded city, consuming insula, apartment blocks, and leaving owners desperate. Crassus organized his own private band of firefighters, but with a cruel twist. When a building was ablaze, they would stand idle until Crassus himself arrived. He would then offer to buy the burning property at a pitiful price. Only once the desperate owner signed over the deed would his men act, saving what could be salvaged. Through this ruthless system, Crassus amassed a vast portfolio of real estate. Some sources claim he owned much of Rome itself, hundreds of buildings and estates, all purchased for fractions of their worth in moments of despair. This was not his only scheme. He also profited from the chaos of civil wars, buying confiscated property from Sulla's proscriptions at bargain prices. The blood of Rome's fallen paved his road to riches. Crassus also invested heavily in slaves, not merely as field workers, but as skilled artisans and tutors. He trained them in specialized crafts, increasing their value, and used them to expand his estates. His wealth was so vast that ancient writers estimated it at 200 million sesterces, an unimaginable sum in the ancient world. Pliny the Elder later remarked that Crassus was the richest man Rome had ever seen. To Romans, wealth was a sign of status, but Crassus embodied something darker, limitless greed. His craving for gold seemed unquenchable, a hunger that set him apart even in a society where ambition and avarice were common. Wealth in Rome was never idle. Crassus used his fortune to build a network of clients and allies. He loaned money freely to young politicians, demanding loyalty in return. Among those he supported was a rising young Julius Caesar, whose early career Crassus bankrolled. With his gold, Crassus purchased not only friends, but power. He gained influence in the Senate, commanded respect and fear in the Forum, and positioned himself as one of the great figures of his age. Yet money, though it bought him political clout, could not satisfy him. For in Rome, True greatness lay not merely in wealth or politics, but in military glory. Here lay Crassus's frustration. His contemporary, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, Pompey the Great, had won dazzling victories in the east, crushed rebellions, and returned to Rome as a hero. Pompey's name was celebrated in triumphs, his statues erected in public squares. Crassus, by contrast, though rich beyond imagination, had little military glory to his name. He had served under Sulla, but he lacked the victories that brought immortality in Roman memory. Among Romans, wealth alone was not enough. Glory was the true coin of the Republic, and Crassus wanted it desperately. Crassus finally seized his chance in the Third Servile War, when a slave rebellion led by Spartacus threatened Italy. Gladiators and slaves had broken free, defeating Roman forces again and again. It was a humiliation for the Republic. When Crassus was given command, he acted with brutal efficiency. He reimposed harsh discipline on his legions, even reviving the ancient and terrifying punishment of decimation, forcing every 10th man in failing units to be beaten to death by his comrades. Fear welded his army into shape. In battle, Crassus drove Spartacus's forces south, finally crushing them in 71 BCE. The war ended in blood and terror. Crassus ordered 6,000 captured rebels crucified along the Appian Way, their bodies lining the road from Capua to Rome, a ghastly warning stretching for miles. It was the most infamous display of Roman cruelty, and it secured Crassus a measure of glory. Yet even this victory was overshadowed. Pompey, returning from Spain, claimed he had mopped up the remnants of the rebellion and was hailed as a co-victor. Crassus's triumph was diluted, his hunger for recognition unsated. Out of this rivalry, a fragile alliance was born. In 60 BCE, Crassus joined forces with Pompey and Caesar to form the First Triumvirate, a pact of convenience that dominated Roman politics. Crassus brought wealth, Pompey brought military prestige, and Caesar brought ambition and brilliance. Together, they bent the Republic to their will. Yet beneath the alliance simmered jealousy and distrust. Crassus, despite his fortune, remained the least celebrated of the three. And so, he sought one final chance at glory, a campaign that would end not in triumph, but in catastrophe. Crassus cast his eyes eastward, toward Parthia, Rome's rival empire. Parthia was rich in trade, gold, and renown. A victory there could rival Alexander's conquests and elevate Crassus to eternal fame. But what began as a bid for glory ended in the sands of Carrhae, where Crassus's greed and arrogance led to one of Rome's greatest defeats and to his own brutal, ironic death. The desert of Carrhae, when greed turned to ashes. Marcus Crassus had conquered everything that gold could buy: estates, allies, influence, even the Senate itself. Yet all of it felt hollow beside the shining laurels of Pompey and the dazzling victories of Caesar. In 53 BCE, already in his 60s, Crassus resolved to carve his name into history with a conquest of his own. The East, the fabled lands of Mesopotamia, beckoned him with visions of endless wealth and glory. To his enemies, he was a miser. To his allies, he was a financier. But in his own mind, he was destined to be a conqueror, to rival Alexander. And so he marched his legions into the desert, toward Parthia, and toward his doom. Parthia was no ordinary enemy. Born of the remnants of Persia, the Parthian Empire sprawled across the east, commanding rich trade routes that carried silk, spices, and jewels. Its rulers boasted wealth to rival Rome, and their horse archers were feared for their swiftness and precision. Yet to Crassus, Parthia seemed ripe for plunder. He dreamed of crossing the Euphrates, seizing Mesopotamia, and perhaps even marching as far as India. The Senate did not formally sanction this war. It was a private gamble. Crassus poured his own wealth into outfitting the expedition, raising 7 legions, some 35,000 men, supplemented by cavalry and auxiliaries. His soldiers followed, lured by promises of riches. Yet many in Rome whispered uneasily, Cicero sneered that the war was driven not by necessity, but by greed. Even Caesar and Pompey raised eyebrows at their partner's ambition. Still, Crassus pressed forward, convinced that fortune favored the bold. But fortune, like gold, is fickle. In the spring of 53 BCE, Crassus led his legions across the Euphrates into Parthian lands. At first, success seemed within his grasp. He captured towns, secured supplies, and appeared poised for victory. Yet his judgment faltered at every turn. Rejecting safer routes through friendly Armenian territory, Crassus instead plunged directly into the deserts of Mesopotamia. His guide, a traitor named Ariamnes, led him astray with promises of shortcuts, dragging the Roman army deeper into barren wastes. The sun scorched, water grew scarce, and morale began to crack. It was here, in the dust and heat, that the Parthians made their move. The Parthian commander, Surena, was a man of cunning and spectacle. He advanced with an army that seemed pitifully small, perhaps 10,000 cavalry, against Rome's 35,000 infantry. But the Parthians held an advantage that would prove devastating. Their horse archers, mounted on swift steeds, armed with composite bows of terrifying power, they could rain arrows while staying out of reach. The battle began near the town of Carrhae. Crassus arrayed his legions in the traditional Roman formation, confident that discipline and numbers would prevail. But as the sun rose, the desert rang with an unending storm of arrows. Hour after hour, the Parthians circled, loosing arrows that pierced shields and armor. Roman infantry, trained for close combat, found themselves helpless. Whenever the legions tried to advance, the horsemen withdrew, loosing more shafts. Whenever they held their ground, men collapsed in bloody heaps. The famous Parthian shot, and where archers feigned retreat, then turned in the saddle to fire as they fled, shredded Roman ranks. The ground became a carpet of corpses. Crassus had brought little cavalry, and his allies deserted. His legions stood trapped in the open, a vast anvil hammered endlessly by arrows. Among Crassus' commanders was his son, Publius Crassus, a young officer who had served with distinction under Caesar in Gaul. Hoping to break the assault, Crassus sent Publius with a cavalry detachment to chase the Parthians. At first, the maneuver seemed bold, but it was a trap. The Parthians lured Publius deep into the desert, then encircled him. Outnumbered and overwhelmed, the Roman cavalry was annihilated. Publius fought bravely to the end, but when all was lost, he fell on his sword rather than be taken. The Parthians, exulting in their triumph, cut off his head and paraded it before his father's army, hoisting it high on a spear. For Crassus, the sight was devastating. His son's mutilated head became a psychological weapon, breaking the spirit of men already battered by endless arrows. By nightfall, the Roman army was broken. Tens of thousands lay dead or wounded, the desert littered with discarded shields and shattered bones. The survivors huddled in despair, their once proud legions reduced to terrified mobs. Crassus, shattered by grief and indecision, vacillated between retreat and negotiation. Surena, ever cunning, offered talks. Crassus's officers, desperate to save what remained, pressured him to meet. And so, under a flag of truce, Crassus went to parley with the Parthians. But the meeting was a trap. Amid shouting and confusion, violence broke out. Crassus was seized, dragged away, and killed. Some sources say he was cut down with a sword, but others tell a more haunting tale, one that turned his death into eternal legend. According to Roman historians like Cassius Dio and Plutarch, the Parthians mocked Crassus's insatiable greed even in death. They melted down molten gold and poured it into his mouth, choking him with the very metal he had worshipped all his life. Whether literal or symbolic, the story spread like wildfire. To Romans, it was the perfect irony. The richest man in Rome, consumed by the wealth he could never have enough of. His end became a moral tale, a parable of greed punished by its own object. Surena then displayed Crassus's severed head in Parthian triumphs. It was said to have been used as a stage prop In a performance of Euripides' Bacchae, the grisly relic transformed into theatre, his death mocked before kings and courtiers. The Battle of Carrhae was one of Rome's greatest disasters. Of the 35,000 who marched with Crassus, perhaps half were killed and another 10,000 captured, many sent to distant frontiers to serve as slaves. Rome was humiliated, its eastern ambitions crushed. For Crassus, the man who had everything, death came not as glory, but as a curse. The Parthians ensured his end was remembered not as a general's fall, but as a miser's punishment. Rome's richest man died choking on gold. And so, in the long memory of history, Marcus Crassus is not the conqueror he dreamed of, but the cautionary tale he never intended to be, the richest Roman, undone by wealth, immortalized by failure.